Cover Killer Nation, let's get the 2014 reviewing season going, and let's get it going strong. We have a brand new reviewing scoring system that we have in place, and if you didn't know about that, then damn, you didn't watch the State of the Music address that was just posted. Shame on you. You should go back and watch that. Hopefully I remember to do it in the right style and not the old style. But at any rate, the first album that we're going to talk about here in 2014 is going to be Plagues of Babylon by Iced Earth. And if you've been following this band, they've been around for quite some time. Since the late 1980s, they've had a real revolving door of musicians that have come through, with John Schaefer, their guitar player, being the main consistent force in this band. And they are now on vocalist number 4,000. Well, it's, I think, like 4 or 5. But at the same time, I reviewed their last album, Dystopia, whenever it came out a few years back, and was very pleased with the output that I heard. The boys definitely felt and appeared, and sounded, should I say, very reinvigorated on this disc, which is not really saying much, considering they really didn't sound like they were all that weak to begin with prior. However, it's definitely really among one of their best discs, at least in my opinion. But there's something I forgot to mention, something I may have neglected. And that's the fact that there's 2 tracks on this album that are part of a larger body of work, which is the Something Wicked arc, the Something Wicked storyline, which was constructed all the way back in the latter part of the 1990s. On the Something Wicked This Way Comes album, it was a trilogy of songs on that album. There were 2 full albums that were dedicated to this idea in the 2000s. There were a couple of EPs that also added to the universe, and then 2 tracks that were included into this whole story arc on Dystopia. Now, I mention all of this because Plagues of Babylon actually has 6 tracks, the opening 6 tracks on the disc, dedicated to the Something Wicked storyline once again. Those tracks being Plagues of Babylon, the title track, Democide, The Culling, Among the Living Dead, Resistance, and The End, ? I really like what they did with this, and I have to say that those people who have been fans of the Something Wicked idea for a long period of time will instantly have a reason to really get this album and want this, considering it's going to continue on that storyline and really just give them something new to kind of look forward to and listen to and enjoy. So, musically speaking, this is definitely the darker half of the album, at least in my opinion. There's definitely a lot more of the evil, the more sinister side of Iced Earth as far as the riffing is concerned, as far as the lyricism is concerned, and you're going to hear this based around the storyline itself, which is something that I'm not going to sit here and explain. That is something that is best left to independent research and independent thought, principally because while the storyline does have a bit of a cut and dry idea to it somewhat, it is also something that is open to a lot of interpretation, considering there have been many people that have been able to draw allusions to it to other literature, either that or other mythological texts, I guess is the best way that I can put it without really just outright saying it. So, the first 6 tracks on this album were able to continue on, and I really think that John Schaefer hit a home run and the band itself really hit a home run in getting Stu Brock to be the vocalist of this band. He was the vocalist for Dystopia, and he is once again the vocalist here for Plagues of Babylon, and he just really knocks it out of the park. You have to really like and admire what this guy does, principally because if you go all the way back to his work in Into Eternity during the 2000s, you really realize that he has a fantastic range. He has a great voice, not to mention the albums that he was on are probably the 2 most easy to remember Into Eternity discs, not to mention also the best in their catalog. This is also something where throughout this course of events we are kind of teased to the fact that perhaps the Something Wicked saga has come to a conclusion, but this is something that is also not entirely and 100% set in stone. Because John Schaefer himself has said that it's something that he doesn't sit down and really try to plan out, and that's the reason why you're probably the reason why you're getting fragments on it on every other album, or getting full albums dedicated to it. It really is something that he's able to sit down and pen at his leisure and at his whimsy, which is kind of a cool little idea. He also is able to tap into some old vocalists, some old friends. He gets Hansi from Blind Guardian to supply some additional vocals on this album, including some of the tracks on the Something Wicked arc that this album is able to possess on the first half. And it's something that, if Stu Brock was good, then, having Hansi alongside definitely just enhances it. It makes it better. It gives it a real individuality to it, but then also the harmonies really soar to new heights, which is a fantastic little trait. And not to mention to hear these 2 men who really have the capability of bending their range to some pretty sick levels on the same track. It's definitely a match made in heaven. It's a great situation to be in, and you really got to appreciate it, because this is something that Could only happen on a Iced Earth album, to be perfectly honest. Now we need to talk about the second half of this album, because we know that the first half, at least for Something Wicked fans, is going to be absolutely wicked. But what about the second half? What about the ones that are independent of this whole storyline? Is it worth it? I have to say that this is the portion of the album that for most fans it may be more of a struggle to get through. And it doesn't have anything to do with any sort of specific weaknesses. It has nothing to do with the fact that they have two new musicians at the helm and this is their first album alongside the band, bassist and drummer. This is actually something that has more so to do with the fact that there are, instead of there being gradual curves of how the songs go from a high point to a slower point, a more aggressive point to a more easy point, some of the best adjectives I can think of. Basically, the way in which they're able to put the roller coaster ride together, there's very high peaks and then there's very, very low valleys. It's something where that turnover, that edge is kind of a little sharp, and sometimes that can really be something that can turn off a listener. It's something that can actually make them feel a little bit kind of on edge. It kind of takes them by surprise, and this is actually not the good kind of surprise that you really kind of just have to sit down and pay attention to. This is instead one that really kind of sneaks up behind you and gives you a jolt, and it's not necessarily always a good jolt. It's instead one that is just kind of there. It satisfies the purpose, but I do like some of the great songs on this half of the album, don't get me wrong. I think Cthulhu and Peacemaker are both very, very good tracks. I think Spirit of the Times can get a little bit kind of it kind of mellows out a little bit too much. It goes a little bit far. Parasite's decent, but to be honest, I really think that the highlight of this is the cover that's on here, which is Highwayman. Highwayman was an old hard rock / classic rock standard, and it was something that Iced Earth decided to take on, but they didn't decide to take it on alone. They decided to get the aid of two other vocalists in order to kind of bolster it up along with Stu Brock, and that's Russell from Symphony X, and also of Adrenaline Mob fame, and then we also were able to get the vocalist from Volbeat, which these three together, if you thought that Hansi and Stu were a good combination, a tailor-made combination, then these three, man oh man, you can definitely tell their individual styles. You can definitely tell who is who. This is not something where you have to sit down and, really painstakingly think about who you're actually hearing. And let me tell you, each individual tone is as crisp and as perfect as ever before. This is something where these three guys went into this cover with their A game. They wanted to deliver the best possible experience, not to mention something that was going to really bring in and attract a multitude of fans, and they just knocked it out of the park. I also like the fact that Iced Earth musically was able to take this, traditionally very, hard rock / classic rock song and give it kind of a dirty metal edge, something that really is unique, something that actually is going to really separate it a lot from the original, while not separating it so much where it sounds completely and totally foreign compared to the original. Really, musically on this album, you have to give John Schaefer and the guys a lot of praise, because even though this is a style of music that is starting to, closely resemble Iron Maiden more and more with each passing album, they're still able to give their own unique little taste, their own unique little tone to it, something that really does give this a very unique sound to it, something that still maintains its freshness, even though this is album number 11, something that really gives Iced Earth a lot of momentum continuing forward. They have to be really, really proud about Plagues of Babylon, considering they took all of the intensity, they took all of the positives that Dystopia really showcased for them, that really showcased to their fans. Dystopia was really just kind of a rude awakening that these guys are still sleeping giants. They're still fantastic. And Plagues of Babylon continues along that trail. This is something that is excellent. Excellent. What would I give this rating? How would I put this in a scoring system? I think I would give it a 79 out of 100. And the reason for this is because while the second half of the album is not nearly as memorable as the first half, at least from the way I see it, I really feel that the songwriting and everything is solid enough on this affair where it is definitely that high B+ range, where it's really just teetering on the edge of being an A album. If I were to choose between the two, I'd probably choose Dystopia over Plagues of Babylon, but that's only by an extremely narrow margin. And I think for the first half of Plagues of Babylon, if it continued forward, either that or if the songwriting on the second half were just a wee bit stronger, I would probably go the other way. This is definitely a great album, though. This is not one to sleep on. In fact, this is one that you should get and tell your friends about, because it's got a great tone to it. Not to mention you're going to be introducing them to a fantastic band who's been going at it for a long time. And I really think that even though they've gotten a great amount of support and a large fan base throughout the years, I think here in 2014, and definitely before Dystopia, this was a band that was kind of a little underappreciated. Their popularity kind of waned a lot, and this is a band that you didn't hear a lot from. This was a camp that always seemed like it was in chaos. But now it definitely seems that these guys are back on solid ground, and even though the Revolving Door has included 2 new musicians on this album, they definitely are still continuing to pump out some kick-ass material, which is definitely worth checking out. So guys, let me tell you, let me ask you, should I say, put in the comments what was your favorite song off of this album. Are you a fan of the Something Wicked saga? Did you know that it was more than just a 1 to 2 album saga? Tell me what you think about this album also in the comments. Leave me some feedback. Tell me what you'd like to see me review next, and I'll talk to you guys next time here in Cover Killer Nation.